Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and today we're talking another Frontier deck. This brand new format brings a lot of exciting decks to the table, and today we're going to be talking Control. Esper Control to be more specific. If you've been playing Standard the last 5 years or so, you know that Esper Control has been a very popular archetype for at least quite a long duration of that format. However, since Control is losing a lot of its popularity in Standard, or at least it's not as common as it used to be, Frontier has a lot of great options and a lot of great pieces that could very well be used in a very effective control shell. Historically, I've always liked Esper Control decks simply because the colors it features are very well balanced. Blue for card draw, black for destruction, and white for balancing and life gain. Based on these colors, you should have a lot of weaknesses covered just because of how versatile each color works, and can essentially cover each other's weaknesses on their own. Another exciting thing about this format is that there is currently no ban list, however that may change soon, so we can use a lot of cards that are potentially banned in either Standard or in some cases Modern, which is pretty exciting. If you're new to Control decks, the idea is that your goal is to stabilize your board and prevent your opponent from attacking or doing whatever they want to do to succeed in their victory. This does take a little while, so if you don't have the patience, this deck is likely not for you. However, if you love long games and love to cast lots of destructive spells and spells that draw cards and get you lots of advantage and do fun effects, this is definitely a deck up your alley. In order to stabilize, we're going to need a good package of removal spells. There are both instance and sorcery spells in my version of this deck, so we'll start there. Starting things off, we have a very versatile package of instants that can combat most threats. We run 2 copies of Fatal Push and Clash of Wills, simply because we don't want to have to deal with early aggression or risk early aggression knocking us out. Since not all creatures will be covered in mana cost of 2 or less, we run an Ultimate Price and a Blessed Alliance, which are nice efficient spells that can be effective removal, but Blessed Alliance can also have a couple extra modes if you like. The reason we use Clash of Wills as our early game counterspell is that we can put as much mana into it as we like later in the game to have it be effective. If you want to, you can also try Revolutionary Rebuff, but I'm not a big fan of this. But it is a nice option if you want to try it. Rounding out this package, we have 4 one-ofs, in the main deck at least, running Anguish and Making, which is a little scary in the aggro matchups, but it's pretty good overall, simply because it kills damn near anything, except lands for the most part. Ajitai's Command, which is good at stopping aggressive creatures, can also be used to gain some life and get a card. Sadly though, unless you want to run some 2-mana creatures, that other ability is really not going to be that useful. Slumguard's Command has a bunch of other nifty modes that we can use. And finally, Summary Dismissal to deal with all the nasty Eldrazi in this format. And plus, like you say, it gets rid of everything indefinitely, never to return. Hooray. Since I'm a fan of it, I run a full set of Scatter to the Winds. This is a stellar hard counter, which late game can act as a win condition. I honestly feel like this card is kind of underrated for a format like this at the moment. However, that may change, and there may be a better replacement. But still, getting a hard counter for 3 mana is pretty darn stellar, and by standard states, it's pretty darn good. Since we are playing a control deck, it can be hard to get a win condition out, and these are just wonderful because if we are almost stable and we just want to counter a spell, we can just pump a little extra mana into it and get a threat on board. It's pretty darn nice, actually, when you really think about it. To help me get the cards that I need for this certain scenario, I'm going to have some card draw and some deep searching effects. This is why I Anticipate and the modern banned Dig Through Time are quite effective. Simply because Anticipate we can use early game and allow us to get the spell we need in the top 3 cards of our deck, or the land we need to cast our spells that we already have. Dig Through Time is pretty self-explanatory. We do run a full set of fetch lands, so getting our graveyard full shouldn't be an issue. More often than not, we'll likely cast it for about 3 mana on average, although I have cast it for 2 before. Still, it's a fantastic card and really gets you what you need. You can also run Treasure Cruise, but personally I'm a bigger fan of Dig Through Time just because I like to go through and pick what I need rather than just draw 3 random cards. In addition to my instance, I run a plethora of black sorceries. I'm running Painful Truths for a few extra card advantage. We do run a few life gain sources, so the life usually is not super relevant unless we're playing against aggro decks. I have a Duress here for some hand attack. I usually feel like a non-creature spell could easily disrupt me just as much as a creature spell could, so I like having one around. You can also get rid of that nasty Planeswalker early game. If we don't get rid of it with the Duress, we can also get rid of it with the Ruinous Path, which, like the Scatter to the Winds, becomes another win condition. Since my deck is full of versatile options, or cards that are usually only a one-of, it can be hard sometimes to actually get that card, which is why I like to have this Dark Petition, just in case I need to search for something that I really need. More often than not, Spell Mastery is going to be triggering, so if I have some extra mana handy, it will be very likely that I will be able to cast the card. I chose Languish as my board wipe simply because I feel like it's my favorite for the format at the moment. There are also some nice options like Fumigate you can try out, but I think Languish is my favorite just because it's cheaper and it gets around a lot of borders like indestructibility. It's very unlikely that you'll have to face a horde of 5/5 or 5/5 plus creatures in this format, but if you ever know that you do, or if you know a deck in your meta or your game store runs something that does that, it may be best to play another board wipe over Languish. For support, I run 4 very nice Planeswalkers, 2 copies of Narset Transcendent, 1 Jason Raveler of Secrets, and 1 of the classic Liliana Vess, which surprisingly did come out in M15. More often than not, all these cards are mainly used for support and to get extra benefits. Narset and Jace, +1 does usually give us a card or kind of as a scry effect. And oddly enough, all these Planeswalkers can have a lot of loyalty if you take them up to start. However, they do come in handy in terms of buffing your removal spell or giving you a bit more leverage or giving you the things you need if you use their -2. You do have to be careful though, simply because if left unchecked or if you're not completely stable, things can get out of hand really quickly and you could easily lose them. Do keep in mind though, although these Planeswalkers' ultimates are very powerful, they're likely not going to win their game on their own, so you'll likely have to have some other thing to really end the game for you. Like creatures, for example. I run 3 big bad creatures, which are really hard to kill and do provide some sort of value in some way or form. If you remember playing through the Dragons of Tarkir block, you'll obviously remember Dragonlord Ajita in the middle there, which will get me more cards upon doing damage, and Dragonlord Simungor, which will take control of a creature or a Planeswalker, which can be very nice. Sphinx of the Final Word is obviously more expensive, but I feel like it's the hardest to kill of the 3. Simply just because it just has hexproof and just really makes all your stuff uncounterable. So even if your opponent does try to board wipe it somehow, you can play a counterspell that, well, can't be countered. Since the format is new, there are some other good creatures that you can run. You can run Flector Mage, like in the main if you want to. I don't know if I'd run a full set, but if some of these cards don't tickle your fancy, you could probably replace them with some. He's a pretty good blocker and can give you some value for a while. You can also run the Torrential Gearhulk, which I feel is really good. I don't have any. I would probably run one if I did have one. I feel like since I run so many instants, I feel like he's just the perfect card for this deck, even though he probably would be the easiest creature to kill among all the creatures you see in front of me. Now, since a lot of our spells take a lot of mana to cast, we do need to run a lot of lands, simply because we want to have the mana available to turn our Awaken spells on when we need them to, and also to cast our giant creatures. As I stated before, we run a full set of both Polluted Delta and Flooded Strand to fetch us the lands that we need. We can fetch either one of our 7 basics or one of our 5 battle lands. The reason I run more Islands and Swamps over Plains is just because I feel like you need blue and black more so than you need white. I feel like I run a lot more mono blue and mono black cards than just mono white cards. However, it's not saying that white is completely scarce in this deck. There are lots of, as you can see, lots of white mana sources. I can even use Polluted Delta to fetch for a Parapary Stream if need be. I also have the Shambling Vents, which are, I guess you can say, are potential win conditions if need be. There are other great lands that you can use, like the Fast Land. I only run one Fast Land, which is the Concealed Courtyard. But if you feel like you could use more, maybe if you want to run a deck that runs more white than, say, black or blue, then I would probably recommend these a lot more so than just the one I'm running right now. Anyway, sideboard time. Okay, so here is the sideboard. Now, like I say, since the format is brand spanking new, there are probably a lot of other fantastic sideboard options that you could potentially run. It's just, like I say, the format's not that old. It just was developed recently. If so, please let me know about it in the comment section. I do appreciate your comments. But this is what I'm running so far, and so far I really like the way it is currently balanced. Starting at the top left, we have more black sorceries. We run another Duress, but we also run Flaying Tendrils to deal with mainly tokens if we ever run into them, but also any early game aggression or decks that like to be aggressive early on. Speaking of exiling stuff, we have one copy of Lost Legacy. I don't know if there are really any super combo-rific decks running around in Frontier, but this is nice to have just in case. We also do run a copy of Collective Brutality, mainly as additional hand attack if we need it, and maybe even against other control matches. But it's also nice because if we really need to, we can discard a card, get some life out of it, or kill a little creature. Moving on to creatures and planeswalkers, I run a copy of Sorin the Grim Nemesis. This thing is huge, but it does give a lot of value if you can stick it. I would think some people would say that this is really bad in the aggro matchup because it costs 6 mana, but at the same time, I feel like it's not awful simply because it gives you a lot of life. I run a couple spell quellers in the sideboard. I feel like they're not great against decks with removal, but if you know decks are just trying to build up an army of creatures or do something else, I feel like that's where they come into play. And plus they do put your opponent on a bit of a clock, which is always nice to have. Beneath here are my instants. A lot of them you'll recognize from the main deck. We run the rest of the Fatal Pushes, then our Blessed Alliance and Ajitai's Command for getting some more life if need be. Anguish Unmaking to deal with more kind of uncanny permanents or permanents that we could potentially have trouble dealing with. Summary Dismissal to deal with more Eldrazi if need be. You don't want to see any of those Emrakul, the Promised End, or anything like that. This spell for mainly counter war flexibility, and Ceremonious Rejection for any annoying colorless Eldrazi or artifacts that we may encounter. And that was Esper Control. This is a wondrous Frontier deck. If you miss playing Esper Control in Standard, or just want a nice control deck with a lot of versatile options. Like I said before, there are several ways you can customize this deck to your liking, or whatever your liking may be. Just keep in mind that, like any control deck, you're going to take a little while to win games, simply because you're just trying to stabilize your board and get a giant threat out there. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe, as everyone deserves to have the knowledge of Magic the Gathering, and doing so will help get this and all the other videos on my channel out there. My name is Ryu Spectre. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I'll see you all next time.